Welcome to India Hangout. It's been a most exciting, momentous and landmark day from an electoral point of view. For the first time, a BJP is staring at a victory which is unimaginable and unprecedented in many ways, or more ways than one. The latest tally we're looking at is 338 seats according to ndtv.com for the BJP plus, Congress 57, others at 148. What we are going to, however, talk about is the agenda ahead for the Modi government. The Modi government has come in with a lot of promises, a lot of over-promises, some might say, a lot of specific areas and issues which they say that they will work on and deliver, particularly on when it comes to social and physical infrastructure. What we are trying to do now, or going to do, is to try and understand how many of those issues can be really addressed and in what kind of time, and therefore what is the magnitude of the challenge ahead for the Modi government that has come in with such overwhelming majority and the people's mandate. With me, Ayaz, Memon. Joining us in our first round right now, Subir Gokarn of the Brookings Institute, former Deputy Governor, Reserve Bank, Naresh Kothari from the stock markets, and we're going to be joined sooner than later by Dilip, Cherian, Madhu, Trehan, and a whole bunch of other people, including Gurcharan, Paranjoy, Guha, Thakurta, Samir, Arora, and Ajit, Ranade. So let's start. Subir, since you're here already with us, let's start off with a couple of broader points. Right, this election was fought not so much on caste and communal lines, but the issues which related to economic growth, economic prosperity, and more issues more fundamental like aspirations of the youth, jobs, and so on. Where do we stand, and where does the task begin?
Well, I think that interpretation is very significant, that for the first time in 30 years, you've seen a national party or its allies, who may be regional but relatively small in terms of numbers, dominate the election, completely sweep areas which for a long time have actually been controlled by regional parties as their pocket boroughs. So this would suggest then that there is some sort of a national aspiration, a national hope, a national yearning at work. And this, I think, provides the government with a great opportunity to start to look at national interest as its primary policy focus, rather than looking at satisfying or pandering to narrow constituencies, which typically in a coalition regime tend to dominate policy making. So we have, for the first time in 30 years now, an opportunity for a government to take a 5-year horizon, a clear 5-year horizon, no threat to its political stability during that period. That means that it can actually start to look at structural change. It can start to address the problems that have plagued us for now the last several years, because we did not take the decisions that were needed for structural change. And that is how the agenda needs to be shaped. We're talking about aspiration. That means quality of life, infrastructure, education, and so on. Certainly livelihoods, and a very, very important emphasis on job creation. However, that's going to work. It's not going to be one strategy. It's going to be a mix of strategies. And also on the food front, food inflation. I think that food inflation has been a recurring and enduring theme through this campaign. And I think that's something that the government needs to be putting a lot of emphasis on. So I would basically frame it in terms of 3 critical priorities to articulate strategies on. Nothing is going to happen overnight here, but to put forward credible strategies and to show progress on a regular basis, I think is of great importance for this government to legitimize the mandate that it has got. And that's food, infrastructure, and employment, livelihoods in the broader sense, including skills and jobs. So that's my wish list, and I think the mandate, the size of the mandate, certainly allows the government to think strategically, to think long term, and to perhaps, if necessary, tread on a few political toes as it goes along, because it is under no threat at all.
Right.
Yeah, can I jump in here?
Yeah, yes,
because what this means is, look, this is a vote for change, but brought about by a wave. And this wave has meant that BJP has got, a majority on its own. 338 seats is what we are looking at, which means it leaves no scope for
any excuses.
You're not going around, trying to scrape a coalition.
Yeah.
You're not going to say later, or you can't say later that, I had to do this under coalition compulsions, pander to this fellow, that fellow. And look at it. In UP, there is not a single seat for the BSP.
Yeah.
So the massive erosion of, as what Subir mentioned, there is nothing to do with caste. I mean, there has been in their arithmetic, they've succeeded, but what they've demolished is the old kind of special interest groups which always looked for favors, or the government always thought to give them favors, are not existing anymore.
Right. Okay. Let's get a few more views in. Naresh, the markets have obviously run way beyond what anyone expected, even though there was a win expected in the market, and obviously the polls were also pointing at that direction. But are we now looking at a situation where delivering to these expectations might be difficult?
I think yes and no, Govind. My view is there are, the nation wanted growth and development, and I think that is what really clicked with the population. I think if you look at the urban population, especially the business community, the people in the markets and all, there was a near unanimity on wanting to get Mr. Modi in or the BJP in to push the whole growth and development agenda. I think the fear or the worry that the market always had for a period of time was whether that was as much a national phenomenon, or was it restricted to the metros and to the to a particular section of the society. I think exit polls sort of confirmed that it was something that the entire country wanted in more or less different proportion, but pretty much everybody across the nation wanted. I think if you really look at what has been holding us back over the last 4-5 years and what the market really wants is a debottlenecking of a lot of things that have just got stuck in the system. So in the first phase, I think what the market is really looking for is just very strong leadership which comes in and says that things which have been held for no reason, just start facilitating the government to function itself. Just start letting the government make decisions which allows the economy to move forward. And I think in the second stage, and I think that is maybe a 3-month to a 6-month process in which the government asserts itself, the bureaucracy starts moving, files start moving, things start happening, decisions get made. And I don't think at this point of time people are worried about yes or no kind of decisions. People are worried about decisions not being taken at all. So you just get that happening and the market will start responding to it. There are quite a few sectors in the economy, if you really look at, which have got stuck or stalled because there was no decision being made for a period of time. Step 2 or phase 2 will be, I think, where the development agenda will start coming into play, which is when what are the policies that the government is putting into place for the next 3, 4, 5 years, and how strongly are they enforcing those policies. And those will obviously include about things on job creation. I think those will include a lot of stuff on social reforms and stuff like that. But I think incrementally, if you can get the economy to move forward from a 4.5% growth rate in the next 6 months or in the next 12 months to a 5.5–6%, and then clearly the trajectory is to move back to a 8.5–9% growth over the next, let's say, 2 years, I think the market will, in my opinion, keep pace with it. So there will be periods of consolidation in the market, but by and large, if we follow this track, I think the markets will just keep pace. You will be in my opinion, we are in the phase of a reasonably strong bull market if the economy sorts of, starts moving and things start catching up.
Naresh, so we'll dwell a little bit on that in a bit, but what you're saying is that the market is not going to expect much for the next 3 to 6 months, except to show very clear signs of assertion on things that have not been done or not have or have been held up in the last couple of years. So what they're looking for is really a unlocking of, or a sort of unjamming of maybe the highway, so to speak, and then we can go on to the next level. Okay, Dilip, Cherian, we've been interacting off and on in the last month or so. Is this okay? Dilip, I think we've lost for a second. We'll come back to Dilip in a moment. Ayaz, the point that I was going to bring, the role of media and perception and all of this. Have the two gone divergent? I mean, in some ways, that the results seem to be quite different, not quite different, but quite substantially different from what a lot of media was at least.
I think it's cut the ground from under the media too.
Yeah.
You know, maybe one exit poll agency has got it right. You know, but otherwise, this has been a stupendous result. I mean, nobody expected it, and I think there was a lot of talk that the media was perhaps skewed in favor of Mr. Modi. For reasons of marketing, money, power, so and so, whatever, or ideologically. But this is a stunning result. I don't think anybody anticipated this, and perhaps the media in its entirety. When you look at the entire block of the media, I think nobody anticipated this. They've all got it wrong.
Yeah, Dilip, the role of I mean, the way things have been communicated and viewed and digested have also got a big role to play in the way the elections played out eventually. Your sense on what the role of the media was and the role of the middlemen, so to speak, was?
I think that it was one of the most strategically well orchestrated campaigns and enormously well funded. But well funded or well orchestrated is not good unless you have a good choir leader. And Modi was fantastic in his role. And I think media played along for whatever reason, but the real messages that went out, and which is partially the reason why he's had such a resounding and unqualified victory, is because I think the young voter, irrespective of caste, color or creed, voted for Narendra Modi, and the young voter is also extremely restless. We've had Naresh talk about the expectations of industry and investors and the need to protect the market, and Subir talked about the bigger issues of getting decision making going and the need to look at a whole panoply of things. But the young and the restless are going to look for results, because indicated to them is that अच्छे दिन आने वाले हैं. The subtext of it, of course, is that Modi has been saying things are in a bad shape, give me 60 months, but nobody's...
So, right.
Communication channels will have to be kept open by Modi and by those around him to make sure that the surround sound is constantly in young people's ears, and they who voted for him are convinced to stay the course.
Right. So, Dilip, quick question. One of the things that the Congress has been, or the UP has been saying on its way out, is that they failed to communicate their success as well. What is the one big challenge for the NDA in terms of communicating what it might do or what it is doing, and failing which it could face serious consequences and pushbacks?
Modi is notoriously good at communications. So I don't think that he's going to fail as far as he's concerned. But it really depends on whether he will have both an office as well as a team around him of ministers who will actually also have to communicate. Because while we have voted almost like it's a presidential form of election, and that's the reason why all manner of candidates have won and a lot of parties have got decimated, is because we have actually turned this into a quasi-presidential form of government. If we continue with that, and I think by choice Modi would like to continue with that, then it's an easier task. And if I were recommending something, I would recommend that he keeps that approach rather than expect a kind of more a kind of more egalitarian cabinet kind of approach and expect ministers to do the communicating for him. It's a Modi Sarkar, first and last, and Modi will have to be the one speaking for it, and he's good at it.
Right. Okay. So, a lot of questions and comments coming in. I'm just going to take a few, not necessarily seek your response at this point, but there's Mukhu to say, should this be the attitude of a politician? Rahul Gandhi and Sonia Gandhi came out and took the responsibility for the defeat, but they did not take a single question, and that's a separate debate, of course. Then another question is on what will Modi's cabinet be like, and followed by what went wrong for AAP. It's quite surprising. Of course, we'll all come to that later. But what will Modi's cabinet be like? That's a good question to ponder on. Subir, do you want to start off, or what would you like it to be?
Yeah.
No, that's not a question that I have any response to. I mean, obviously, there is a group of relatively senior people in the party. Many of them have been in the cabinet before in the previous NDA regime, and there are some new faces in that group. So I presume that all of them will get positions of authority.
Right.
But Mr. Modi's Gujarat cabinet actually was one of the smallest, it was pointed out, amongst the state cabinets. So if he goes lean and mean at the center, then there will be a few more people. Obviously, he'll have to accommodate the 3 or 4 allies that have fought the election with the pre-poll alliance. But it's difficult because this group has been out of power for 10 years. A number of new people have emerged, particularly on the spokesperson role, names that we've only been seeing for the last 2 or 3 years. All of them obviously will get a look in. But there is no real track record to be able to, map individuals with portfolios at this point.
Okay, fair enough. So let me ask the question slightly differently. What are the and Dilip, let's start with you. What are the portfolios we would like to see being assigned, and if you want to take a shot at who it could be?
There's been endless speculation on who will be what.
Yeah.
And I tend to agree with Subir on this, that this is a matter which actually will rest finally in Modi's hands, and he is likely to want to maintain absolute control over it. Various interested parties have started a chorus for a variety of people who they're interested in seeing into the cabinet, but he may choose to keep it lean and mean, and which is his style. At the end of the day, here is a leader who actually does a lot of work himself, so he is not somebody who wants to distribute his responsibilities to make sure that it goes out of his office. He's quite happy to centralize a lot of that. So it's clear that Rajnath and Sushma and a whole bunch of others like Ravi Shankar Prasad, Rudy Singh, who has been the giant killer, a lot of these people will be vying for positions given the fact that they have been there already. Having been there and done that, they deserve that kind of position. But will Modi accommodate all of them, or will Modi listen to voices from the RSS, which looks at accommodating all the castes and the regions in some kind of grand manner for positioning themselves for the next election? These are issues which he will be the final caller on.
Right. Naresh, okay, let's look at the economic portfolio, right? And that's where we are all looking for decisive, actions and decisive statements. What's the market preference?
So I think the finance ministry is the key portfolio that has been spoken about, and Mr. Jaitley's name has been, I think, doing the rounds, and the market obviously seems to be pretty comfortable with that. I think in light of the election defeat, there are questions being raised whether that will still happen. But the market should, he's obviously a member of the Rajya Sabha, and I think the market should be fairly happy if Mr. Jaitley takes over the finance portfolio. Commerce, I think what I also think, and I have a slightly different opinion on this, Govind. I think what I also think is, if he is able to bring in 2 different sets of people into the government, maybe at Minister of State level or even at some advisory level. One is Indian bureaucrats, either former or current, but people who are known to be sharp, smart, and who are basically people who will go and get work done. I think that is one profile of the cabinet which will be very interesting from a market perspective. And second, I think he will try and get, and if he can get a few people who come with international stature and bring either international experience and international linkages, I think those 2 things will become very important or interesting for the market. So those will also get serious value points from the market, if you ask me.
Got it. Okay, so the names you said are already doing the rounds, but you're looking at seeing how this could be supplemented by people with global experience. So arguably Raghuram Rajan with global experience already at the Reserve Bank of India is one example of perhaps what Naresh is.
Yeah, just to take up from where what Subir was saying, that in Gujarat he had a very lean cabinet because he held many portfolios himself. That becomes a little difficult at the center, especially in the light of this kind of a massive victory, taking as he himself said, a 24 coalition member party. Unfortunately, Arun Jaitley's got run out trying to take a sharp single, contesting for the first time. But he can be resurrected through the Rajya Sabha route, so that's not a problem. But there will be some little parlays going on within the BJP, as we know that Sushma Swaraj and Murli Manohar Joshi and some of the old gang, they wanted portfolios befitting their stature in the party, which may all actually have now been kind of blunted those kind of advantages with this massive victory. So we'll have to wait and see what happens from here. I think what Naresh mentioned is good. It makes a lot of sense to me. Ministers of state are going to play a very key role. Somebody like Amit Shah, who will obviously head.
So is that what you're giving him, Minister of State?
Well, that's what one hears. One hears. So those kind of people who Modi has implicit trust in, they'll kind of become very key functionaries. Irrespective of what cabinet
and very logically too.
Whether they hold a cabinet berth or not.
Question, Subir, let me put this one to you, and for a specific reason, because also, I mean, Brookings represents a certain line of economic thought in nation. So Hindol Sengupta asks, are we finally ready to nail the lies and corruption that happens in our country in the name of socialism, or are we still going to continue the socialism charade?
Who was this for?
Subir, that was for you.
Okay. Well, I think let's look at it in terms of the practicalities of running a government, of ensuring that certain basic services are provided, certain basic access is provided, whether it is to education or health or water, and at what level of government is it provided at. So I think the resolution, and putting it in terms of socialism or not, I think is not leading us anywhere in terms of finding solutions. The resolution is very simply put, but obviously very difficult to execute, which is that the government is paying out of its pocket or out of the taxpayer's pocket for a lot of these services. The question is it paying the right price for the quality it's giving? Should it be paying less and providing better quality? Can there be an improvement in the price to delivery kind of mix or combination? And that's what government needs to focus on. There's no question that the government has to continue to provide many services. The question really is, at what price is it providing these services? Is it guaranteeing that these services reach the intended beneficiaries and are not diverted to be used by people who are not intended? Leakages and diversions and so on go on all over the place. We've heard endless stories about how kerosene is being diverted to adulterate diesel, and food grains that are being shipped from the food stocks to the states are being diverted into the open market, and you keep hearing about this. So handling that issue, ensuring the integrity of the delivery process, I think is an absolutely fundamental responsibility of government. And if it does that, then a lot of the fiscal pressure that the government faces because of these leakages or diversions actually start to come under control. So that is good governance. That is effective governance. Not giving up on delivery, not giving up on stopping the provision of services to people, but ensuring that once you decide on what services you want to provide, that you do it in the most efficient way possible. Maybe it is through public delivery systems, maybe it is a public-private partnership, whatever it is, that has to be discovered in each context. But I think the issue is control, accountability, quality assurance, and ultimately that's what begets trust. That's what lets people or induces people to trust the government, that it is actually delivering on what it promises. That's the way to start this virtuous circle.
But so Subir, here's another question. Let me add, Manoj Kumar asks, so the question is, do you think the same strategies will work in states other than Gujarat for bringing up their growth? So it's not about what Modi can do at the center, but the question is, can he transmit this to other states?
I think strategy is important, and strategy means combining the roles of the center. What is the appropriate role of the central government and what is the appropriate role of the state? So what you need to do is work in some sort of tandem. I think one of the points that Mr. Modi kept making during his campaign was in a sense talking about empowering chief ministers and asking them to play a more important role in the formulation of central strategy, of national strategy. Now, if that happens, and there are a couple of institutions that enable that, but for various reasons they don't seem to work very efficiently. I think that leads to the ability to work off a sort of national model, a national strategy, but also dovetail it with the particular strengths and weaknesses of individual states. Now, if that sort of mix can be attained, and obviously it's not going to happen overnight, it's something that will have to be worked at very hard and with all kinds of risks. But I think that's the direction in which the policy-making process needs to go, where there is a broad national outline, a national framework, but then each state is actually finding its best fit and its best role in that framework. Right. I think that would be a powerful combination that does require both sensitivity on the central government's part and a willingness to participate, a willingness to engage, and perhaps more resources, more capacity at the state government level. But that's really, I think, the way in which the combination needs to move.
Right, and we're going to come to some of the specifics, Subir, in a moment. More comments coming in. There's one which is from Yatish, which he says, I think in response to Ayaz, he says Amit Shah is most likely to be in the PMO and will not hold any direct portfolio in the ministry. This has of course been reported close to Modi. Another question from Manoj. He says, what will be the role of Rajnath Singh in Namo's cabinet? Dilip, any guesses?
Well, the guess is that Rajnath will probably get defense, and as long as it goes to anybody other than VK Singh, he'll be all right.
But VK Singh can, I mean,
Minister of State there.
Yeah, or maybe Minister of State. I mean, he has thundering majority. I mean, thundering victory. Win or victory, and in Ghaziabad. So perhaps he might get more than.
But just so that we complete that thought.
Yeah.
A journalist from Pakistan said that the point in time when any democracy has to worry about the possibility, however distant, of a military coup is when a chief of staff stands for election. So chiefs of staff standing for election or being inside government are not a great harbinger of things in a democracy. Okay. Pakistan has a lot of experience in this area.
Okay, fair enough. Another point from Yatish, he says, if Modi has his way, then we will soon see some major announcements relating to infrastructure, which would invite private sector investment to give a boost to investment. So I guess the expectation here seems to be that there's a whole wish list or to-do list which is going to be announced soon. Naresh, is the market expecting something like that?
I think over a period of time, Govind, definitely. So my personal opinion is the market obviously is expecting, and if you look at it, how the market is looking to move, it is moving, it's expecting 2 or 3 key things. One, it's moving, expecting the rupee to appreciate, which basically means that you're looking at tech, pharma, and I think those 2 sectors to underperform to some extent. Second, the market is expecting that we will look at growth coming back over a period of time and across multiple sectors. So it is looking at cyclicals, it is looking at sectors like real estate, sectors like auto, all of these, most definitely power and power ancillaries. I think those are the areas where the market is looking for things to happen. I think it is also looking for money to move out of some of the erstwhile favorites, which were basically only focused on low debt, high ROE, supposedly what you would call high quality companies in the consumer space predominantly. So I think there will be some rotation of money out of consumer sector into a lot of the other sectors as the economy starts broad basing and making moves in other areas.
Right. And we're going to come to some of the other areas like defense and foreign policy, though there was a reference to VK Singh in the context of defense. But let's hear what Montek Singh Ahluwalia, Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission, had to say to me about a month ago when I asked him what were the challenges ahead for the incoming government.
We should avoid getting too worried about hundreds of constraints. I mean, we're still a poor country, so there are hundreds of constraints. I think what we need to look at is what are the 3 or 4 critical things which are holding back the growth from getting to, say, 5%, which is sort of the average of the last 2 years, to, I think, somewhere between 7 and 8%, which I think India is perfectly capable of achieving. we need to revive the thrust on infrastructure development. I mean, basically because good infrastructure is what brings in private investment from anywhere in the country. I mean, whichever state offers good infrastructure, all Indian investors from every other state will want to go there.
Right. So, Ayaz, I think we've touched upon the economics so far. Non-economic issues. What are your? What do you think are the 2 or 3 key concern areas?
Look, I think the kind of hype and the hoopla that has built up around the election campaign and what Mr. Modi now stands for. I'm just trying to visualize the picture and for which kind of So obviously, you know, a government that works. So somebody who's a tough guy who takes decisions fast.
Do you see him being completely secular? I mean, that was the big fear of all the liberals, right? No, many of them in media.
Well, you know, that is, you know, you can't read a person's mind, but you have to wait and see how the actions come about.
Okay.
So, for instance, you know, there are some things given to the minorities for their upliftment. Is that going to be continued or is that going to be changed? And if it's going to be
there is a minorities ministry which has done nothing.
Which has done nothing, exactly.
It's 6 years
old.
So
you might take a position, look, we don't want appeasement, but there are certain other ways in which we can cause the upliftment of all the affected groups.
Okay.
So we'll have to wait and see that. But I think really it's about obviously the corporate sector, the big business houses or the business houses. I think it's also about the young brigade in India, young and restless as Dilip Cherian mentioned earlier, and they want instant gratification. That's going to be his biggest challenge.
Concern. Right. So Narendra Modi is speaking live at this moment. Let's cut across to him and then just get a flavor of what he's saying and how he's approaching things, and then we'll come back and continue our discussion for the agenda ahead.
अंग्रेज सल्तनत के जुल्मों को सहने का सौभाग्य नहीं मिला, लेकिन भले हमें आजादी के लिए जीने मरने का अवसर न मिला हो, लेकिन आजाद हिंदुस्तान में स्वराज्य के लिए जीना ये हमारा संकल्प है। हम स्वराज्य के लिए मर नहीं पाए, लेकिन स्वराज्य के लिए जी सकते हैं। देश के लिए मरने का सौभाग्य नहीं मिला, लेकिन देश के लिए जीने का सौभाग्य मिला है। 125 करोड़ देशवासी, 125 करोड़ देशवासी, आज देश के लिए मरने का समय नहीं है, आज देश के लिए जीने का समय है। और इसलिए भाइयों बहनों, अगर 125 करोड़ देशवासी देश के लिए जीने का संकल्प करते हैं, 125 करोड़ देशवासी एक नागरिक एक कदम चले, तो मेरा देश 125 करोड़ कदम आगे बढ़ जाएगा। ये जनशक्ति है जिसके सामर्थ्य से भारत का भविष्य बनने वाला है। और भाइयों बहनों, आपका मुझ पर भरोसा है, मेरा आप पर भरोसा है। और ये भरोसे की ताकत है जो भारत के सामान्य मानवी के सपनों को पूरा करने का सामर्थ्य रखती है। और भाइयों बहनों, उसी के आधार पर हमें आगे बढ़ना है। भाइयों बहनों, देश की जनता ने 3 सेंचुरी लगाई है, ट्रिपल सेंचुरी। एनडीए को 300+ दे दी। देश की जनता का मैं बहुत आभारी हूं। भाइयों बहनों, मैं प्रारंभ से कहता आया हूं, ऊपर कर दो, आप ऊपर कर दो, ऊपर कर दो।
Right, there you are, Narendra Modi speaking there live, and he talked about right up your street, triple century, and that.
You know, I'm trying to find a sporting metaphor for this whole campaign.
Yeah, but he's found it before you did.
No, so and I've been thinking, is he like, say, Muhammad Ali the boxer?
Yeah.
You know, the way he's the jibes he's taken, the way he's mocked his opponents, the theatrical approach.
Yeah.
You know, all founded on very sound technique.
Yes.
And then I thought to myself, it's actually far, you know, it's far removed from that. It's actually the Bodyline series. If anybody who's followed cricket, and Douglas Jardine used, in my case, in my imagination, the Harold Larwood of this election campaign is Amit Shah.
Okay.
Jardine used that one bowler to destroy Australia because they saw the threat of Bradman emerging and they would rule for many, many years.
Yeah.
And they plotted and planned for 2 years.
Yeah.
The execution was ruthless,
and
brutal,
almost
cold-blooded.
Amazing parallels.
Amazing parallels. And those who opposed Jardine and his team, that include Pataudi Senior, Iftikhar Ali Khan Pataudi, was sent back from Australia to England. You have no place in my team.
Right. Okay. So the interesting cricketing analogy, and mind you, we only embarked on that because Narendra Modi talked about a triple century, and triple centuries are not easy to come by. Okay. Subir Bhaumik joins us from Calcutta. Subir, let me get your thoughts on some of the key agenda challenges ahead on the defense and foreign policy fronts that we would like to see action in coming days or weeks. Okay, Subir Bhaumik we've lost. I think we'll get him back. Ajit Ranade is also joining us now. Ajit, thanks very much for coming on. What we're trying to understand is what are the key challenges ahead for this government, and let's talk about economically, particularly coming from the point that there were a huge amount of promises made, to the extent that now we are looking at perhaps a over-promise and under-delivery.
By promises, you mean the manifesto.
Aspirations, jobs, taking this country to another level, bringing back growth to maybe a 8 or 9% level, and so on.
Yeah, but those are sort of medium term. There's no timeline to that. I don't. We can go by the manifesto. The BJP manifesto is a fairly detailed document.
Yeah.
And it has specifics as well. But I think clearly the agenda is in two parts. One is an immediate 100-day agenda, because that's the time when you want to make some solid progress or some solid signals to to your intentions and what you intend to do. And then there's a medium term to longer term, like a 5-year plan. So the immediate things that I think this government should try and do, I think GST should be up there, because the only states which were holding out against GST were BJP ruled states. And now that BJP is in the center, there is a better chance of implementing GST. So that I think is doable in this fiscal year itself, even though we're already in May or June. The other stuff is to continue, the other immediate stuff I'm saying is to continue the momentum of the CCI, the Cabinet and Investments. So Modi, if nothing else, is very big on execution and implementation. So kind of a detailed micromanagement look at what is stalling, what is holding up those projects. It requires coordination between the center and states. And in several of his speeches, he has said that I'm going to work with state governments or state chief ministers. So the CCI would be a good way to illustrate or to demonstrate this this working relationship between center and state.
Right.
May I just jump in here, Govind?
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Subir. Ajit, just hold your thought for a second. Subir, we've been trying to talk to you for a second. I mean, I know you have to go, but a quick sense on defense and foreign policy challenges or tasks for coming weeks and months. Okay, I think we're having a problem with Subir there. Let me come back to you, Ajit. Is there a distinction between what the corporate sector wants and what the economy largely needs to get back onto the track, or the track that we once saw?
I would distinguish between two kinds of expectations from the industrial sector or what.
Okay.
So both are important. The SME sector, as you know, contributes almost 50% to output, employment, and exports. But most of them tend to be suppliers or vendors to large corporates. So the large corporates are important because they are the ones who initiate very big investment projects and longer term, longer gestation, kind of projects. So the expectation from the larger corporates is to, first of all, speed up all kinds of decision making at various levels in various ministries, most prominently for environment and forest clearance approvals regarding environment clearances, land acquisition. This is about 53,000 mining which are pending in various states. So large corporations, and of course the expectation of a very somewhat more predictable and stable policy regime in terms of tax laws, retrospective tax amendments, U-turns, tax litigations, or some kind of a continuity of policy, no abrupt changes here. So that is the expectation from the large corporates. And from the SMEs, I think we need to find ways to enable a greater access to funds. I mean, SMEs find it notoriously difficult to access banking, capital banking, bank loans, or even capital markets. And then, of course, there is the whole business of what they call inspector Raj, harassment Raj, and various kind of bureaucratic and other impediments. So those are the kind of things. The ease of doing, broadly speaking, I think let me club it all under ease of doing business. Both the corporates and smaller and medium sector.
Yeah, and that's something even the big companies seem to be saying and have been telling me that, don't actually talk so much about what you need to do for us, but do something for the smaller enterprises who feed to us, because their well-being is more important to us than us in some ways, because we are already taken care of. Ajit, a somewhat sideways question which comes from one of our viewers. He says, I would like to ask the panel the reason they would like to give credit for bringing Modi to power, which is the people, was the wave created among the people via social media, offline, online. I mean, which is really what he's asking is it because of what Modi had to offer, or was it, as he says, the depression of the Indian from the Congress?
I think there are three factors, Govin. I think there are three factors. Number one is disenchantment and disgust almost with the previous regime. Number two is people's expectations. I mean, obviously, because there is this whole debate about Gujarat model, and Modi stands for execution, administration, clean governance, or lack of corruption. So there is that whole thing I call expectation. And number three is the way the Modi campaign, the BJP campaign was crafted, extremely executed with this precision and micro-targeting. I believe their team learned a lot from the Obama campaign. So there are three factors. A negative factor which is going away from the previous government, a factor of expectations, huge expectations from the electorate, especially the urban, semi-urban, and the third is the way the campaign itself was run. So all three factors contributed to this astounding victory.
Right. Okay. We've got more questions, and there's one which I'm going to come to Subir for on the food security bill and Narega schemes and their future. But before that, Uday Kotak, the founder of Kotak Bank, and his views on what he would like to see from an incoming government.
Redefining India's priority sector as a bank, and I think policy should look at this. I think the RBI governor has mentioned about this, but priorities have to be relevant to today's time. Small and medium businesses will be the heart of India, and this is where I would love to see how we can finance, how can we be bolder in that, how we can expand our banking network. I would love to see a new government which is pro-business, not necessarily pro-businessman. The area of venture capital, angel investing requires a policy framework. Third, we need to figure out our laws around jobs. Finally, we need to see a financial services industry and the banking industry included to get out of shackles of bureaucracy.
Right, and that's going to be a big challenge. Create an environment which is pro-business as opposed to being perceived to be pro-businessman. Okay, Subir, I hope you're still there. The big issue in the coming budget is how will Modi carry the food security bill and Narendra schemes forward, considering he does not have much headroom in the budget, and I would expect him to start talking about it very soon. Subir?
Yeah, well, I think there are 2 or 3 things that need to be done. You can't just decide to roll back a program that has been enacted in law. So you have to think of ways in which you can contain it. The basic entitlements have been laid out. Of course, he's got enough of a majority to amend the law if he wants to do that. There's nothing that's going to stop him doing that. But I think it will set something of a negative precedent. But from the fiscal side, if you remember in 2012, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee in his budget had talked about a new FRBM, which actually capped, apart from all of the overall deficit targets, also proposed, it did not go through, but proposed a cap on subsidies. I think that's a good way for this new government to get started, propose a new FRBM, reactivate the whole fiscal targeting or fiscal rule process, and put a specific cap on subsidies. This should cover all subsidies. So within that cap, then it's really up to the government to decide where do they want to allocate the money. If they want to give it for food, then they have to reduce it on petroleum or fertilizers or something. I think putting these sort of external limits and hard limits, legislated limits on spending, particularly on subsidies, I think is one way in which the government can actually put down a long-term, an enduring fiscal formula, which will give a lot of credibility to the fiscal consolidation process. So that's, I think, on the expenditure side. On the revenue expenditure side. On the capital expenditure side, we have to be looking at what I would call balance sheet substitutions, which is if money is being raised by the sale of assets, whether it is public enterprises or mineral rights, mining rights, or spectrum or whatever, I think we have to go back to a proposal that the UPA 1 had made but never implemented with any conviction, which was the National Investment Fund, which is to ensure that this money now gets spent on, the kinds of things that Ajit was referring to earlier, that there are so many projects of critical importance that have got stuck for whatever reason. Part of it is money, part of it is finance. So let's get those off the ground, put the public money in if that's how you can get them rolling, and then look for ways in which you can bring private money in as the projects reach more secure kind of conclusions. I think we've got to balance out the need to rein in subsidies, that is clearly there, and also increase spending on capital, on asset formation, which is an absolute compulsion. Both of these can be done through, I think, relatively straightforward fiscal innovations, and I hope that that path is followed.
Right. Ajit, what are you directionally looking forward for from this government in the next few days? I mean, in the context of the whole subsidy benefit entitlement regime that we've somewhat been used to now in the last decade. I mean, and because I'm assuming that if something has to be done, the direction has to be initiated quite early. For 2 reasons. One is because of the potential damage that it has created, and secondly because of, let's say, the balance sheet problems that even Subir talked about.
Yeah, but Govind, like I said earlier, one of the so it's not as if we don't have on basically on the books. It's a question of implementation. So typically, let's say the railways presents a budget, annual budget, which talks about how much freight will increase and how much freight will be moved in the country and how much will be the various physical targets. I'm not talking about revenue targets. And then they are not met. Or let's say if there is a annual target for power production, electricity production, it's not met. How much of it is from the public sector units. So then we don't have a good system of accountability for it. I think the one hope is that all these things will actually be met. I mean, there will be a stronger sense of accountability of meeting whatever targets are set forth, whether by infrastructure activity or by governments themselves. So I think it's not as if, for example, even subsidies, we have a good system of targeting and ensuring that leakage is minimized, but often the plot gets lost in the implementation. I wonder if they can also gas cylinder subsidies was directly being put into people's bank account, and it was working for about 10 million gas cylinder subscribers. It got stopped because of the Supreme Court judgment on Aadhaar, but that surely can be expanded, and that was having an impact on limiting the subsidy. So I think it's all about precision in execution and accountability, speed. These are the kind of things I think which this government can distinguish itself from, because I don't think it's necessary to reinvent the wheel and have new policies. Of course, they can do a lot in terms of, you said, immediate signals. For example, litigation, tax litigation. Even the Supreme Court has said that more than 50% of the litigation is done by the government itself. So Modi's finance minister can simply cut the Gordian knot and say that any litigation which is more than 3 years old or 5 years old, and where the amount in dispute is less than 3 lakh rupees or 5 lakh rupees, is deemed to be settled at the level of the tribunal. These kind of decisions will go a long way in showing that they really mean to unclog a lot of this.
Right. Okay. Paranjoy Guha Thakurta has joined us. Paranjoy, we are trying to understand what are the key tasks ahead for this government. We've been focusing somewhat more on the economic side, given that many of the promises too are on the economic side or lead from the economic superstructure rather than anything else. What's your sense?
Okay, I haven't heard what the others have said, so I might be repeating what others have said, but nevertheless, I think his most daunting challenges ahead of him is to revive the economy. Essentially, I mean, the economy in the last few years has done not well. In the last 2 months alone, for instance, the index of industrial production has been down. It's declined. Industrial production has actually been down. So if Mr. Modi's famous Gujarat model is to be replicated across the country, he certainly has to get industrial production going. And that's the only way he can create jobs in the foreseeable future. That's point one. But I think really, what's really going to be very, very difficult for him is to control food inflation. And I mean, we've seen how food inflation over the last 6 years has been hovered around double digits for the better part of these last 6 years. Never before in the history of India has food inflation been at double digits or close to double digits for as long, for as extended a period as 6 years. Now, I am not sure how Mr. Modi is going to tackle food inflation, but I do believe that's arguably one of the single biggest tasks. The third task is that, the Congress talked a lot about inclusive growth. In the last 10 years, 4 years, we've had 10%, we have had 9% plus GDP growth, including for the first time over a 3-year period, we had continuously GDP growth at over 9%. And if you look at the government's own data, the National Sample Survey Organization will tell you over this 10-year period, the average annual rate of growth of job creation has been 2.2%. So despite all this talk of inclusive growth, the fact that we've not been able to create sufficient number of jobs for our youth, despite GDP growing, is a huge, huge challenge. So if Mr. Modi cannot create jobs, that would be a huge, huge problem for him. And if I may say the last problem, and that's really nothing to do with economics. I mean, we're seeing in the way in which this, the Modi wave, the tsunami which has swept across, well, almost the entire country with the exception of a few states like Bengal, Orissa, and Tamil Nadu, this whole issue of not just inclusiveness in the economic sense, but inclusiveness in the social and political sense. I mean, to truly to break down. I mean, to have a situation where you don't have identity politics, where more and more young people don't vote or don't look on themselves as belonging to a particular caste or subscribing to a particular religious faith. If that has to take place, then the minority Muslim community, who account for 1 out of 7 persons in this country, I think their apprehensions and their fears would have to be assuaged. So these are some of the biggest challenges that I see ahead of Mr. Narendra Modi and the government he's going to head
in the very near future.
Samir Arora joins us from Singapore. Samir, very good evening to you. You've been fairly bullish, as I can see. What we're trying to understand is two or three things. One is the larger task ahead, as the financial markets see it. And number two, does this rise in the financial markets suggest that there is sufficient momentum to now start creating some real investment on ground, which is so critical for all the other things that we need, including obviously bringing back the economy on track?
Well, surely, but before that, I think the initial sort of framing of the question is a bit wrong, or at least what I heard from Paranjoy, which is that, we are saying that Modi has to solve inflation, Modi has to solve employment, unemployment. I don't think that is what we are celebrating today. It's not that there were two other proposals on inflation reduction and the Indians voted it down and chose Modi, therefore now he has to come up with this solution. Today we are celebrating the fact that there were three choices and two of them, if you assume AAP is one of them, had no track record and the other one had plans, and the third and the one you've chosen had some history of success. So we have chosen a good administrator. It really does not mean that now how will he solve inflation, how will he solve industrial production, how will he solve? He will not solve, but he will definitely do better than what others were doing, and that is a start. But secondly, in a macro sense, it's not that we have to introduce the Gujarat model and bring it to Delhi or to the nation. It's not that if Alan Mulally of Ford had become the Microsoft CEO, that somebody would have said, is the Ford model of manufacturing going to be applicable in Microsoft or not? It is that you've chosen an administrator who has 3 or 4 qualities that any CEO needs or any PM should have, which is he works hard, he's articulate, which is needed to rally support, and today he has got power which he can use, and he has a track record which he can be proud of. Now, whether he does it in a small way or a big way, in initial 6-9 months, the financial markets and investors will give him time. And that will coincide with a natural bottoming out of the economy. Plus, of course, he has to do a few things. But just look at it differently. In 2004, the Indian market fell 17% because one of the, I think, CPI guys said on a Sunday, let divestment go to hell. So on that one line, without bothering what else was there, the market went down 17%. What if randomly he says this Sunday that I am going to form a committee which will evaluate what is the excess real estate owned by railways? He doesn't have to do anything. He has to just say. What I mean is, from a financial market point of view, today we will give him benefit of doubt on anything. And obviously he will do a few things. But to put the bar so high and say, how will he solve this, how will he solve this? I don't think he's going to solve all of them so fast and so quickly. But it is better than the choices that we had. And in absolute, it is also quite good. I mean, and relatively, it was definitely very good. And it so happens that it's coinciding with a bottoming of the economy, which anyways a cycle, and with a little bit of effort, a little bit of confidence of the world investors and domestic investors, someday it will come up on its own. It's like same as saying that Mr. Raghuram Rajan has caused this currency to rally by 20%. He was there at a good time. He did obviously a few things, but it coincided with the world backing off on emerging market currencies, and obviously he did his bit in it, and I think the same thing is going to happen with Mr. Modi.
Paranjoy, do you want to come back on that? The expectations are really, I mean, limited in some ways to what a good leader can, demonstrate and deliver in the near term, which is more in the nature of, the symbolism. I mean, I don't mean symbolism as in with that nothing will be done, but more symbolism, more directional thinking, and maybe a few actions, rather than some real landmark changes and sharp improvements to a whole lot of things, including inflation.
See, the speaker before me obviously is a gung-ho supporter of Mr. Modi, and I'm not one and have not been. So all I was merely trying to articulate was the big challenges that lie in front of him in improving the state of India's economy. And I don't think anybody has any doubt or disagreement that there's a lot that has to be done to improve the current state of India's economy. So I was trying to put down some of the biggest challenges. people talk a lot about reform. It's a buzz phrase which everybody loves. It's a bit like motherhood and apple pie. All of us love it. But if you ask me, what would be the single biggest, economic reform initiative which Mr. Modi would have to initiate, is what the Congress has not been able to do for the last 10 years, and perhaps you could argue even longer, is that have a common goods and services tax. Now this would not just unify India's fragmented market, which is fragmented into over 2 dozen states and union territories, but this would require statesmanship on the part of the Prime Minister, and Mr. Modi is about to hold that position, because it has a lot to do with India's federal structure, in the manner in which economic powers are, get devolved from state to state. It would mean, compensating the relatively less well-off states for revenues that they would lose. So these are among the major challenges. I'm not saying that Mr. Modi has a magic wand. All I'm arguing is that having raised expectations to a very high level, people would expect from him a lot, which is not going to be easy to deliver. All I'm trying to say, that whether it's Mr. Modi or Mr. A, B, C, or D, to control food inflation in India is not exactly the easiest of tasks. To create new jobs in this country when your economy is not growing as fast as it was some years ago is not easy. The point I was also underlying, that if you follow policies which are similar to the policies that were followed, even when the economy was growing at over 9%, you were still not creating sufficient jobs. And I'm personally of the view that though within the Congress there was a left-wing faction and a right-wing faction, and it's often, somewhat simplistically said, Dr. Manmohan Singh used to, epitomize the sort of neoliberal right-of-center economic policies, and Mrs. Sonia Gandhi and Jairam Ramesh and others were the sort of left-of-center socialist kind of group within the Congress. But I would say a lot of the policies that the BJP and Mr. Modi have articulated so far are not very different from those of the Congress. So therefore, as an observer of the economy of this country and the political economy of the country, I have certain doubts as to how quickly or how expeditiously Mr. Modi would be able to live up to the aspirations of the millions and millions of young people who voted for him.
Right, and that's a fair question, Paranjoy. Ajit, let me come to you. What are the, before you go away, what are the one or two key things that you're looking at from either a directional or an action taken point of view in the next few weeks or months?
Well, I mean, obviously, the immediate curiosity is about who is going to get which portfolio. Second is about, as I said, whether they will announce a 100-day program, and whether that 100-day program will include things like GST and so on. Third is, just to pick up on the earlier discussion, is whether there is it's ultimately a signal about implementation, and perhaps also articulating and communicating. Our outgoing Prime Minister was known to be very, very, very silent or hardly spoke. So I hope this Prime Minister Modi will talk about. Because I think often investor optimism, investor sentiment, investor confidence gets built if there's more communication. Simply talking probably solves half the problem. So I think these are the kind of things we look forward to. Who's getting which portfolio? What is the continuity with the policies which have worked? Like I said, the CCI is an example. What are the 100-day priorities of this new government? Will they be announced? And will there be more communication and articulation with the investing public?
Okay, so what are the one or two things you hope they should not do, Ajit?
I think, we overestimate the kind of leeway that even a government like this has, even though they have, in theory, an absolute majority where they can change laws and make complete U-turns. I think we overestimate it's not as if they're going to do any drastic things. So I'm sure that they're not going to be more more, what should I say, with this rights-based approach that we have seen, right to food, right to education, right to work, right to, and that has created a pretty significant fiscal burden. I'm sure this government is not going to expand that fiscal thing. So one thing we hope they want to do is further expand the fiscal deficit beyond what it's already stretched. But I don't think that's likely to happen. So I'm not worried about unexpected and nasty surprises. We are only looking forward to very concrete implement, as I keep saying, the one big strength of Mr. Modi as Chief Minister of Gujarat has been that he's a doer, he gets things done. So that's what we want to see.
Okay, small question again, and it's a question and comment. Ajit, perhaps you can respond quickly before I go back to Samir. Goods and services tax is not a central issue but a state clearance, and BJP states were opposing it because they felt the state would lose complete control over tax collection. Modi may be able to do this better than other leaders. So it's more like a comment from Yatish. Now, and a lot of people have been saying, I mean, Adi Godrej, who I interviewed just a month ago, and as he's been saying many times in the past, has said that the GST introduction itself could be a 0.5 to 1% GDP kicker, and that may be a little optimistic, but clearly there are good things that could happen if there was that kind of integration. What's your sense?
Yeah, this is an important step, even though it's been repeated ad infinitum, repeated ad nauseam. That GST will do three things. One is that there is an interlocking set of incentives which actually reduces the incentive to evade taxes. So therefore, it will actually lead to increased tax collection. Secondly, it actually truly makes India a common economic market. So all this wasteful practices of having storage depots and offices in different states just to evade interstate taxes, that will go away. And number three, like I said, it actually will add to GDP by at least up to 1% per annum forever, because it removes some of these inefficiencies. And in addition, because it reduces the price to the end customer, it has the potential to have put downward pressure on inflation.
Right. Okay. Samir, let me come back to you. We've looked at 3 or 4 broad issues. I mean, in the run-up to these elections, we've talked about jobs, education, state of the economy, and some of the second rung, which also may be first rung, which is issues like inflation and interest rates and so on. What in your mind is the things that need to be addressed fastest, either by way of talking about it, as Ajit said, so that gives some comfort to people, or actually doing something?
I think the fastest has to be industrial production and investment. But I think some of the things that because there's so many low-hanging fruits, at least initially at the announcement level and later on, hopefully implementation. But I don't think the main government has never got railways under its thing for the last, 10, 15 years since Mamata Banerjee was there and whoever else was there after that. So even in railways, I believe I read somewhere that he's thinking of rationalizing some ministries and combining them, which would be a signal towards some, rationalization of government and lesser role of government. Some simple things, for example, on Nokia, the government is fighting and wanting some $3 or $4 billion of taxes when the total company was sold for, I think, $7 billion to Microsoft. Some of these things, unlike Vodafone, which has become now, sort of into the law and more of a political thing, this one, it doesn't even need anything. It's not a political issue yet. So there are many small things that can be done. I was saying that to suddenly say, how will you reduce food inflation? We would have liked that and would have evaluated it more significantly if we had an alternative proposal from the guys who lost, and we would have said, no, we made a mistake. The market has gone in the wrong direction by choosing the guy whose model is weak in terms of inflation. These are things which were, the problem was there yesterday also, was there last week also. And for many things, I feel that a good administrator is enough. You don't need to change policies, even if you follow the same policies. But let us say you direct the subsidy correctly. On Narendra, you link it to specific projects. I don't know. There's so many things. Just in terms of getting it through, that itself is a big step forward. We hope that he does more than that. But I think we're underestimating what just a good manager without changing any policies can also do. Because I think we had bad management. And also, I think to even give confidence to the bureaucrats, to stand up to the world, to NGOs, to media, to say that I know we have done this test, we have done this evaluation, we believe that this coal allocation is right. If somebody can credibly say it, we know that many people back off because you present the evidence and you present things. So it's not everything you need a change in policy, new reform, FDI in retail. I don't think you need all of that to say that he has to do something different.
So, Samir, you know, I think that's a good, I mean, it's a good way to approach it. I mean, and you used the example of Alan Mulally and said, okay, if we were to transplant Alan Mulally into, you know, all kinds of corporations, including Microsoft, would he replicate the same magic? And Alan Mulally came to Ford from Boeing, where he obviously, and though Ford was quite different from Boeing, he still replicated it somewhat. So you're betting on the man and the man's fundamental, let's say, qualities and attributes as a manager. Take us through that. Take us through what gives you the confidence that he will deliver and do the right thing for the country, the economy, the people, the jobs, and all of that stuff.
I'll give you one example. I went on a political tour with one of these brokers, and he met one of the guys from the coalition partner of BJP, NDA partner, and we said, "You tell us, what does Mr. Modi do which is different?" So I'll give you a very trivial example, but very interesting. He says that in Gujarat, if the bureaucrats don't come by 9:15, the register which they have to sign is moved and put in the CM's office, in the annex C of the CM's office, so that you have to go near him. It doesn't mean you meet Mr. Modi there, but you have to go near his office to sign it. I love these kind of things because this is day-to-day management. Look, and he gave us a few more about how things are done. I feel that our Congress, everybody in that, was too distant from day-to-day work. At least we never saw it, so we felt like that. And, you know, we are not interested that, oh, for nuclear, somebody stood up, you know, because we don't even relate to it. So the thing here is that on a day-to-day basis, there are so much changes we see in companies which happen. Okay, let's look at Mr. Narayan Murthy. Now, Mr. Narayan Murthy has come in for a year, and during this period, 12 people have left or more than that from senior positions, and nobody cares. Because they are trusting him and giving him benefit of doubt and believing that he has a strategy which he has not 100% articulated to us. I think the same benefit and honeymoon period will be granted to Mr. Modi because he has a history which is good. It's like a CEO of a subsidiary being chosen to be the CEO of the company rather than somebody from planning department or HR department or the union leader, Aka Kejriwal, becoming the CEO. So you have chosen a smaller subsidiary CEO to be the CEO, and that's not a bad idea to have.
Samir, I'm going to come back in a second. There are more questions coming in. Paranjoy, do you want to take this one? Is it worrying that we practically don't have an opposition?
You know, that is indeed a worry. But before I come to that, I want to express my disagreement with the analysis put out by the speaker before me, who seems to suggest that running a country with 1.2 billion people, as diverse and plural as India is not very different from running a corporation, even a giant multinational corporation. That the CEO of a MNC and the role of the Prime Minister of India, it has a lot of similarities, and that many of India's problems could be resolved if we had a good manager who made sure, you know, the bureaucrats came on time. And
Paranjoy, what I think Samir is saying is, I think Samir, what Samir is saying is that bet on the man or bet on the person, and if your bet is right, then a lot of other things follow.
The point is the alternative was not presenting a different model on which we would have said, oh, we made a mistake. The problems were there even if Mr. Modi had not become PM. That's my point. It's not that we chose between two models of governance. We chose between two individuals because the previous model had also failed.
You know, all I can really argue that politics and economics and the political economy of India goes a little beyond, you know, these models of governance. You know, you have model X and model Y, and because model X didn't work, model Y would work. Sorry, I would disagree with you, and if you would be a little more patient, I'll try and explain why. Look, running a country and running a state is different. Running a state and running a corporation is also very, very different. Here you are dealing with many aspects and not just looking at, say, the working of a country from the perspective of a CEO. I mean, for instance, you look at healthcare. You look at education. You know, it's all very fine to say that, you know, we don't like many of these rights-based programs, whether it be the right to work or the right to food or the right to education or whatever bit. It's all very fine to say, you know, everything would have been hunky-dory if all these subsidies reached their intended beneficiaries and we didn't have, you know, stealing. It's all very fine to say what we need is good governance and not good, and we need more governance and less government. You know, these are nice, clever, good buzzwords, buzz phrases. Sure, Mr. Modi is going to go through a honeymoon period, but all I'm arguing here is that the problems that confront a country like India are extremely complex. They are structural in nature. Let me give you a few examples to illustrate a point. Say this whole issue of agriculture. You know, in agriculture, Gujarat is supposed to have done well and done better than many other parts of India. But till there, you have a problem because, you know, the Narmada waters and the canals that have to be built, I mean, a lot remains to be done. Now, here you have a situation where 60% of the total crop area of your country is not irrigated. So everybody, from the farmer in the field to the finance minister, has to pray to Lord Indra. Now, take the structural problem. Agriculture is 17 or 18% of your GDP. But about half your population depends directly or indirectly on agriculture for a livelihood. Now, to say that you can treat the problems of farmers in India the same way as you've done in Gujarat, that the problem is similar in Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh and Bengal and Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, you'd only be fooling yourself. Secondly, this whole issue of industrialization. Gujarat has had a long history of trade and commerce. Now to say that, okay, I'm going to give you land to set up your car factory in the same way as I gave Tatars the land in Sanand because they went away from Bengal. Again, in my opinion, is to sort of run away from the reality of this country.
May I ask a question? What was the alternative vision to solve the irrigation problem? We today are only celebrating or discussing that out of 3 people or 4 people who were there, people chose Mr. Modi. If that's what
I'll give you the alternative.
The relative versus absolute discussion, I thought, in my mind.
Let me give you the alternative. The alternative to the large Sardar Sarovar project was to spend even a portion of the money in the form of smaller micro hydroelectric and multi-purpose projects. That's the difference between going in for these, you know,
but we don't know what Mr. Modi is going to do in these things. We don't know that.
All right. One second. That's the point I'm making. We don't know. All I can say is the BJP manifesto talks about interlinking of all the rivers of this country, which sounds great, okay? But actually doing it would prove to be an ecological disaster. The BJP manifesto talks about, you know, how we need high-speed train, which is all very fine.
Yeah, Paranjoy, I think, Paranjoy, what's your, I know you seem to have 1 or 2 specific objections, right? So, I mean, I think you need to articulate that because I think we are going too deep into specifics which no one perhaps has the ability to respond to at this point. I mean, including obviously the incoming government.
No, I'm making a very brief point. I'm saying Mr. Modi and the Bharatiya Janata Party has won with a record kind of a support from a very large section of India's electorate.
Right.
Okay, never before has a political party won the kind of majority that the BJP has or is about to get since 1984. Okay, when the Congress party under Rajiv Gandhi won, you know, like 400 plus seats in the Lok Sabha. Never before has a non-Congress political party got the kind of huge majority that the BJP has got since 1977, when there was a Janata Party and a conglomeration of parties, which, as you know, didn't last for very long. So I am saying that expectations are high. That indeed the youth, 8% or more, 8%, the voter turnout has gone up by about 8%. Again, never before have 2 out of 3 voters who are eligible to vote in India have actually voted. So all I'm saying is that Mr. Modi and his government have indeed raised expectations to very high levels. And I'm saying it's not going to be easy for them to fulfill this.
Fair enough.
The task
Fair enough. No, Paranjoy, actually that's what we started with. I mean, I think everyone accepts that expectations are running very high. The question therefore is, what's the agenda that is implementable and deliverable given all of this? Now, I think what Samir is saying is that in some ways he's betting on the person, or he's bet on the person and his managerial capability to deliver it. This person comes with a track record as opposed to others who perhaps don't or may not have. And which is a good start, and I think that's what he's saying, but we'll come back to him in a moment.
Yeah, no, I think you said it there. I think what Samir is trying to say is that people of India had to make a choice between three, perhaps at the most a fourth person. They've made their choice. We must respect that choice. Yes, there is the possibility, as Paranjoy says, that there is, you know, this whole concept of Modi, the Gujarat model has been oversold. Now, whether it will work or not after the honeymoon period, we'll have to wait and see. But right now, the choice has been made. It has to be respected, and let's see how. I think every word, every sentence that he utters from here over the next few days, barring the coronation and the celebration, is going to be watched very intently. But after the words will come the, you know, policy making or decision making, which will start impacting lives. I think Paranjoy's part is also well founded, that because the whole idea of Modi has been so aggressively oversold, patience levels may be a little thin.
Go ahead,
but
Samir.
we have to live with it.
I'm saying that this is like, let us say a couple gets married in Venice, and therefore Paranjoy will say, but you know, there are divorces, 30% people get divorced, there'll always be a mother-in-law, how come we're celebrating so much? Today we are just celebrating the marriage and not calculating the odds, that how many of them end up in divorces, how many of them have mother-in-law problems. So we will have a honeymoon period.
You're welcome to speak for yourself.
By the way, I'm reading your gas wars right now.
Thank you so much. Very kind of you, I'd be very happy if Mr. Modi makes a dent in crony capitalism in this country.
Right. So, Samir, go ahead. I think you wanted to finish that.
What I mean is, as far as I am concerned, as an investor, I have to take it that today India made a good choice. And now we have to wait and see what happens. But he has the mandate, he has the confidence, he has the articulation, and he also has this power today to be able to choose the best guys. Now, if suppose in 1 month or whatever, not even 1 month, I guess, 2 weeks, we find that he didn't choose a great finance minister or he chose somebody political, which I don't see why he will, then you can say slowly the disappointment will come. But for the moment, it is going to feed on itself. Just today, we just find that 3,400 crores were bought by foreign investors. That will bring down, I mean, currency strengthened by say 1%. It will bring down your oil thing by 1%. These things start the ball rolling, and then he has to, of course, do a few things. But today, let's not say that how will he link the rivers. I don't think anybody even thought that he's going to link all these rivers. These things they put down at that time because they had to put an alternative vision. But he has, I believe now that he doesn't have to prove to anybody. If he doesn't, he doesn't have to do it.
Let me say something which is close to your heart. Since you're an investor, I'm not. Since you track the capital markets far more closely than I do. In the last 15 years or thereabouts, the number of investors, Indian investors, who've parked their savings or even a proportion of their savings in financial instruments in India has actually come down.
Correct.
So today, whether it be the stock exchange at Mumbai or the National Stock Exchange, it goes up or down depending on the purchase or the sale decisions of foreign institutional investors.
Correct.
Now, do you think Mr. Modi will and can make efforts to say broaden the base of investors? We don't even have 2% of our population investing in stock markets. We don't even have 3% of our population that pays income tax. Do you think Mr. Modi can change the situation, and if so, how?
Well, very easily he can change it because if the stock market does well, these people come in. They will always come in the end. So far, they haven't come in because for 5 years nothing was happening. But before that, you know, India as a whole has done quite a bit for investors. They choose not to take advantage. What can we do? For example, there's no tax on dividend. There's long-term capital gains are zero easily, and this also came in the paper, so it's not a suggestion. I read about a week ago, 2 weeks, the Ministry of Finance made a proposal, which I also made to the previous finance minister, that we should scrap short-term capital gains tax and instead charge higher higher STT tax in every transaction, so that you neutralize your tax collection, but you will get it more consistently. There will be less bargaining with the income tax guy, and you won't have to collect it only. You won't get it only in bullish times, but in all times. And it's not a subsidy. You're not taking less tax than what you are today. If you do that, immediately the need for Mauritius goes away for stock market investors. The need for all that goes away because all they are now saving is short-term capital gains, because long-term is anyway zero. So it can be done in 1 second. The thing is that people did not take decisions. I'll give you one more. For the last 15 years, since maybe 95 or 96, all foreign investors have been making recommendations to the government, including I saw this time in July when we met Mr. Chidambaram last year, they did the same. Is that foreign investors cannot manage a foreign FII. If he has an office in India and the fund manager is based in India, then the fund is taxed in India, and therefore nobody opens an office in India. Whenever we have an office or anybody has an office in India, they call the Indian office as advisors. Now Singapore gives us tax incentive to open offices here, and for 15 years India could not do it. It doesn't need regulation, it just needs one guy who can understand these things. And we believe that if these guys also can't understand it, who are business minded, and then what can we do? Since others have not chosen to do it, somebody else is being given a chance.
Okay.
Samir, I hope Mr. Modi is listening to you or will listen to you attentively, since your words will remain immortalized on YouTube for a long time to come after this.
All our words, Paranjoy, all our words. Don't forget us.
One second. But, you know, I'm just thinking about something that Samir said. I agree with him that we should do something about this, the infamous Mauritius route. Having been there, what you do about India's special and unique relationship with this clutch of islands in the Indian Ocean, the easternmost point in Africa, some would say the westernmost point in Asia. After all, if you look at the last 22 years or thereabouts, roughly 40% of the total inflow of foreign direct investment.
Mr. Paranjoy, I am in this business for 20 years. I can tell you prima facie that this is nothing but conspiracy theory. Let me tell you what has happened. If an Indian were to invest in United States, you know that if you were to invest, there will be no capital gains tax on you, short term or long term. You can invest as little. What India has done is, because India is always playing double games, it didn't want to tell the Indian public that foreign investors don't have to pay capital gains tax in India. So they told the foreigners come via Mauritius. Nearly 90% of money that comes via Mauritius, or maybe even more, is 100% legitimate. But the idea is that the Indian government is scared of saying to the world that you can come in without paying capital gains tax in short term or long term. But US has no capital gains for foreign investors, although it has very high for its own. Singapore no, Hong Kong no, UK no. Nearly every country in the world for foreign investors in the equity markets has no capital gains tax, short term or long term. India has, in a sense, isolated one or two areas and said, come through that and then you can have it. But if they made it open, you will not be able to handle it because, foreigners are coming. So it's just for that angle that they have done it. Rest of the world anyway does not charge capital gains tax to foreigners.
Right. Okay.
The wise words will be heeded by whoever becomes the next Prime Minister. The next Prime Minister.
Finance Minister. Finance Minister.
No, they're not ministers, but I'm saying Mauritius is this bogey that all this money is P notes and all that. We know, I'm in this business. I don't think 98% of that has any problem. 2% may have that. Like people have.
Right. Okay, gentlemen, we've run out of time. We obviously want to continue this discussion and drill down to some more specifics in coming days. But I think we've got a good sense on what lies ahead in terms of the challenges, what it will take to manage those challenges and to deliver to some of those promises that we've been talking about. I think we've got some very interesting points on what is already done and what needs to be done. We hope to obviously continue this debate and start looking at some of these specifics, like I said. Thank you very much, Ayaz here with me, Paranjoy for joining in, Samir, Arora for staying back late and joining from Singapore. We'll continue this conversation on the India Hangout. Thanks for watching.